Hi there, my name's Potatoes953. So, how's 2020 been so far? Pretty good. Pretty okay for me, all things considered. Aside from a global pandemic, the election, Daddy Kim supposedly being in another coma. Oh, Kimmy, why? Why do you have to toy with my heart so much, Mr. Kim Jong-un? A racial upheaval in my home country, China, and most of the United States being on fire, and The Last of Us 2 existing. Oh god, I have to review another game from this year. Let's see, what do we have today? Ghost of Tsushima. Sounds like an Italian pasta sauce. Alright, let's fire it up. Ghost of Tsushima was developed by Sucker Punch Productions, who had an amazing catalog of games on the PlayStation after previously working on one title on the Nintendo 64 with Rocket Robot on Wheels, which was so obscure as far as I could tell just by reading the Wikipedia article, that it doesn't even have a Metacritic score. That says something. Then getting bought by Sony and making some great games and some not so great games. They made Sly Cooper 1 through 3, which has a huge cult following. Then followed up with 5 infamous games. 1 and 2 being really good, and the rest being pretty meh-worthy. Aside from Assassin's Creed games, which, much like Infamous itself, became worse with every entry, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and of course the Elder Scrolls 4 and 5 were really the only big open world games of that of the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 game generation. However, after Infamous First Light, Sucker Punch went silent until finally revealing their next game, Ghost of Tsushima, which was slated for a release in 2020, 2 months after The Last of Us 2. Then The Last of Us 2 got delayed. And then again, until it came out on June 19th, 2020. And a little under a month later, Ghost of Tsushima came out with very little hype surrounding it. Everyone had already blown their money on the most divisive game probably ever. But then the reviews came out, and they were really good. And they were by people who actually knew what they were talking about and reflected what the general public felt about it. Was it as good as the reviews made it out to be? Or was it like The Last of Us 2, with an almost perfect score from critics and a 5 from actual players? As the internet's most honest nobody, it is my job to say, fuck yeah, it's amazing. Why wouldn't it be fucking amazing? Oh yeah, because I'm comparing it to the fucking Last of Us 2 here. That's why. Oh, but this game is like on another level comparatively to The Last of Us 2. Of all the PlayStation 4 exclusives that I have and have played, this is by far my favorite. All of the other ones I had little or huge problems with, so let's go over them for funsies. Uncharted 4 and Uncharted The Lost Legacy were just okay. The stories were pretty meh-worthy, and it wasn't super engaging gameplay-wise, and they were basically the same as Uncharted 1 gameplay-wise. God of War was amazing, but wholeheartedly wasn't for me when it comes to the gameplay. I wasn't super into it. Spider-Man was fantastic, and is the only one I have no real issues with, honestly, and I'm super excited for the PlayStation 5 sequel. Persona 5 and Persona 5 The Royal weren't my thing as a fan. Go check out the Persona 5 Royal review for that one for details. I just rambled on for 30 minutes in that video. Ghost of Tsushima, was fantastic all the way through, from its gameplay to its music. Throughout this video, I'll go over my thoughts on it in my honest review of Ghost of Tsushima. The story goes that you play as Jin Sakai, who is the last living heir to the Sakai clan, as he and his uncle, Lord Shimura, the Jito of Tsushima Island, a Jito, was the lord/governor in the feudal system in Japan, with the king being the shogun, and then the person he would go up to was the emperor, kind of. The emperor was just kind of there as a puppet, to say, oh yeah, we're in charge, basically. As they fight the greatest foe to face Japan until the Allies in the Second World War, being the Mongol Empire. If you didn't know, this is the Mongol Empire. And this is Japan. When the Mongols attempted to invade Japan, after eating everyone around them, they took Tsushima Island. And then their fleet got destroyed by a big fuck-off typhoon, with the story being that the last samurai on the island summoned this typhoon to destroy it. That's actually where the whole game is based off of, is the story of this guy. But it's a historical fiction thing. It's trying to make light of the legend of, basically, oh yeah, it wasn't actually a typhoon he summoned, he destroyed it himself. Yeah. It's basically just trying to make sense of the legend. And then their second invasion, basically the same thing happened, only they didn't even make it as far as Tsushima Island. You got all that? Good. Because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. All the samurai defenders of the island are killed at Komada Beach, aside from Jin Sakai. That's you! You, as Jin, must raise a fighting force to drive the invaders off of the island, after you are saved by a thief named Yuna. You, the player, will force Jin to throw away his samurai code, and become the Ghost, in order to do simple things that virtually every game allows you to do, like sneak attacking enemies. Yes, in this game, you must learn to sneak attack enemies through the story, which is awesome, because Jin is a samurai, and that's against the samurai code. As someone who complains about story derailing gameplay, I'm actually a big fan of this, because in these cases, the story is coming as the tutorial is going on, and it's teaching you in bite-sized chunks. So, like, example, if during the sneaking section at the start of the game, after waking up with Yuna, after waking up and Yuna is trying to spirit you away, it was also teaching you how to do that. You wouldn't learn the patterns of how patrols work. And that's one of the problems with with a lot of stealth games, is that it dumps too much information on the player. And what happens in the mission where you learn how to sneak attack enemies, where Jin learns how to sneak attack enemies, it's pretty fucking obvious how you sneak attack enemies if you've played any game whatsoever, any stealth game, I should say, with any stealth mechanics, is you see flashbacks of Jin learning the Samurai Code of Honor, which breaks up information dumps, and as you learn how the stealth works. And this is a case where the gameplay comes first to the story, and I really, really think that's how you do a story-based game, is you make the gameplay first, and you build the story around it to complement the gameplay. Thank you very much, Neil Druckmann, you idiot. And Hideo Kojima, you guys don't understand that story comes after gameplay. Ugh, these people, these directors of games. I know I'm not a game developer, but I know for a fact, as a player, that watching a movie is different from playing a game. And playing a game, I go for something entirely different than what I've watched a movie for. And I know that a lot of directors in these games of games want to be movie directors, and they're trying to force everyone to watch their shitty movies. I'm sorry, I just had to go off on that tangent. Back to it. As you should remember, as it was only about a few minutes ago, Sucker Punch did make Infamous before this game. And those are open world games. And so is this game. We all agree that Breath of the Wild is amazing, right? With its open world. But it has flaws. Like not having course access all the time, and having combat that, while in depth through the physics mechanics and some of the bullet time attacks and stuff, it can mainly be boiled down to mashing the Y button and occasionally blocking. With a great, and Ghost of Tsushima is basically a far smaller scale Breath of the Wild, with Breath of the Wild's major flaws fixed, with a greater emphasis on combat against human enemies, which is one of my problems with Zelda games in general, is that there aren't very many humanoid or human enemies in general. It's always giant monsters or just monsters in general. I would love to see some more human enemies in Breath of the Wild 2. And, for example, a fix that Ghost of Tsushima does to Breath of the Wild is, no matter where in the world, aside from one mountain in which the challenge is to get up it with no horse access, you can call your horse and he will teleport to you. There is no bullshit of your horse can't hear you when he's less than 100 feet away. Thank you very much, game. And along with that, there are actually some interesting side quests, and I accidentally did all but 2. That is something Breath of the Wild cannot say. With most of that game's side quests being, go here, get this, and get some rupees, basically. And Ghost of Tsushima has a very in-depth combat system in which you cannot spam an attack button and occasionally block to win. It takes a lot more precision with your attacks. I'm aware that Breath of the Wild defenders will say that that's basically describing the Breath of the Wild system, but with that game, you can succeed while mashing the Y button and occasionally eating food and nothing more. With this game, you will constantly be shifting between different play styles depending on which enemies you're fighting, and there are many, many enemies within one fight. So, I think that it's a solid point in the favor of Ghost of Tsushima. In addition to the major fixes to Breath of the Wild, and what I said earlier about the combat itself is fun as hell. I don't think fun is fun, or I don't think hell is fun, but whatever, I don't care. It's a fun little term I came up with. There are 11 separate enemy types. 11. And you can find all 11 in one fight. Each of these enemy types have a different stances that they are weak to. And that you don't necessarily need to swap stances to win, but you are going to have an easier time if you swap religiously, and in order to master the combat, you will need to swap religiously. You unlock these different stances, which are based off of actual stances that swordsmen using katanas use. They used. People learning katanas nowadays, they still use them, but, who the fuck is using a katana in combat anymore? I'm just stating the truth here. But you unlock these different stances by killing or observing Mongol leaders. In addition to that, to the different stances you use, that all use your sword, or your katana, you have ranged weapons. A short bow, a long bow, which you get through a mystic tale, which are based off of Japanese myth within that island. Or Japanese myth, or the mythos of the island. And a poisoned dark blowgun. And your ghost weapons, such as lures, smoke bombs, sticky bombs, actual grenades, and kunai, which are, if you're not aware, they're just little knives that you can throw. They're throwing knives. And all of these utility weapons can help you get through sticky situations. And you get these through increasing your legend score, which is how much people are talking about you throughout the island, and how much the Mongols are fearing you. You increase this by doing side quests, doing the main story, liberating the map, lighting the lighthouses throughout the island, and helping people captured by the Mongols on the road. Increasing this legend stat will also, these legend points, will also net you skill points, which leads into the light RPG aspects. And it's just in general a really interesting way of thinking about it, of like, yeah, you're not technically leveling up, like in the way an actual RPG does, but it's based, but if you think about it, an actual RPG, you know, your level is based off of how much people are talking about you. And that's actually a really interesting idea. Especially when it comes to something like Fallout 4, where people are actually, you know, if as you're leveling up and doing stuff throughout the world, people are talking about you. So yeah, I just thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about it. I loved this game. And this wasn't just from a playthrough, just for the story. I platinumed this game. This means I found every haiku, I did every fox shrine, and yes, I did pet as many of them as I possibly could once I figured out you could actually pet the foxes, which is amazing. More games need to let me pet the goddamn animals. Liberated all of the island, did every side quest. Yes, I am aware, I said that I did all but 2, but that was before I did all but 2 before I finished the game's main story. And I dressed up as Sly Cooper, which you can, and there's an achievement for it. This game is one of the best games I've ever played, and it's a game that you really do need to play for yourself. The story is fantastic. The music is great and totally fits the setting. It respects the history very, very well, and that is something I look for in a historical fiction game. And most of all, the game is fun. Like, if a game isn't fun or engaging, then what's the point of it being a game? And I honestly really do hope this game becomes a series. I don't want it. I don't want it to star Jin Sakai. I don't even need it to be set in Japan. I think the feudal/medieval era hasn't been covered enough in games, and I would love to see a series of games with the name Ghost and then a name set somewhere in the world. One place that immediately came to mind for me was the Mongol/Horde invasions of Poland, and the name Ghost of Warsaw sounds really fucking awesome to me, and I think it would be really cool to see an open world game set in like Poland or Czechoslovakia, France, or something or Italy, or something like that. That would be really neat. Or hell, even the British Isles would be neat. I just think that this idea of an open world game set in the medieval/feudal era would be really neat. I would love to see something like Europe, maybe even more Asian countries like the Java or the Polynesian area during the Mongol invasion. That'd be neat. But regardless, that's getting off topic. I'm a history geek. So this kind of thing excites me. I would give this game a 9.5 out of 10. It is nearly perfect all the way through, and I loved the hell out of it. There is a couple of issues, like pathfinding the enemies is kind of annoying. Doing the duels, which are 1v1 fights, it does take a bit of trial and error, but I don't think this really hurts the game. I think it's just you being aware and learning the attack patterns more. Go play this game. It will make an otherwise terrible year into a still terrible year, but with Ghost of Tsushima year. It's better than Persona 5 The Royal. It is way better than The Last of Us 2. And it is one of my favorite games of all time. This is a game you shouldn't pass up on. And hey, apparently it's getting a online co-op mode this fall that nobody expected. They weren't using this as a marketing... They never said anything in the marketing material as to whether or not this was getting any online mode. Nobody even expected an online mode to this kind of a game. It's just kind of really awesome that the developers aren't treating their customers like total jackasses, like a certain EA, Activision, and whatnot. It's really nice to see a studio and a publisher who aren't acting like total jackasses. And I might get PlayStation Plus just to try it. But, as always, it's time for me to leave. So, as always, have a fantastic day and a fantastic life. And I'll see you again in the next video.